Hello, everyone. I always believed that if someone betrayed me, I would know that there would be signs, a shift in their voice, a hesitation in their touch, something, anything, that would warn me before the knife slid between my ribs. But I was wrong. I didn't see it coming. And by the time I did, it was too late. It started on a Sunday night. A quiet evening, nothing unusual. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, and I was in the kitchen washing dishes. She laughed, just a small, soft sound, but something about it made my skin prickle. It wasn't a laugh I recognized. Something funny? I asked, drying my hands. She looked up too quickly, like she hadn't expected me to notice. Just a stupid meme, she said, turning the phone away slightly. A small thing, a meaningless thing, but my gut twisted. I wanted to let it go. I really did. But something inside me, some primal instinct I didn't understand, told me that this was the beginning of something I wasn't ready to face. I sat down next to her, pretending not to notice how she subtly locked her phone before setting it down. Long day? I asked. She nodded, stretching her arms over her head, as if to shake off some invisible weight. Yeah, work was exhausting. I knew her schedule. She should have been home an hour earlier. But I didn't say anything. Not yet. I just sat there, listening to the silence between us grow thicker, waiting for the moment the truth would finally show its face. The air between us felt heavier than usual, like something invisible had settled in the space we once shared. I wanted to believe it was just my imagination, that I was tired, overthinking, letting paranoia sink its teeth into me. But deep down I knew, that night, as she lay beside me in bed, I listened to her breathing. Slow, even, peaceful. I wondered how she could sleep so soundly while my mind was unraveling. At some point, I must have drifted off, but when I woke up, the bed was empty. I frowned, glancing at the clock, 2:37 a.m. The bathroom light was on, the door slightly ajar. And then I heard it, a whisper, soft, secretive, not meant for me. I sat up, my pulse hammering in my ears. No, he's asleep. A pause, a quiet laugh. I miss you too. The words sliced through me like a blade. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, feeling my breath come faster, heavier. I wasn't supposed to hear this. She wasn't supposed to get caught. The realization burned through me, hot and blinding. She was mine, and someone else had touched what was mine. The whispering stopped. The bathroom door creaked open. She stepped out, phone still in her hand, and when she saw me sitting there in the dark, she froze. For the first time in our years together, she looked like a stranger, and for the first time, I wasn't sure what I was capable of. She stood in the doorway, her body half lit by the dim glow of the bathroom light. The phone was still in her hand, fingers wrapped around it so tightly that her knuckles had gone pale. She didn't speak. Neither did I. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Two people who once shared everything, now reduced to silence and secrets. Finally, she swallowed. You scared me, she said, forcing a small laugh. Fake. Everything about her in that moment was fake. I ignored the attempt at playing this off. Who were you talking to? Her lips parted slightly before she pressed them together. No one. I tilted my head. Lie number one. I heard you, I said, my voice calmer than I felt. I heard everything. Her shoulders tensed, but she recovered quickly. It's not what you think. I let out a slow breath, leaning forward, resting my elbows on my knees. Then tell me, what exactly am I thinking? She hesitated. It was slight, half a second, barely noticeable, but I caught it. She was calculating, trying to decide which lie would do the least amount of damage. Work stuff, she finally said, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. One of my co-workers needed help with something, and I laughed. I actually laughed. I didn't mean to, but the sound left my throat before I could stop it. She really thought I was that stupid. You tell all your co-workers you miss them at 2:30 in the morning? Her face drained of color. And there it was. The moment she knew the truth was no longer hers to twist. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. I didn't mean for it to happen. The cheater's mantra. I stood up slowly, letting the weight of her words settle in. She took a step back, like she thought I might do something. I wouldn't. Not yet. Who is he? I asked, my voice low, steady. She shook her head. It doesn't matter. I took a slow step forward. It matters to me. Her fingers curled around the phone like a lifeline. She wasn't crying. She wasn't even trying to deny it anymore. She knew I had her cornered. And yet, somehow, she still thought she had control. He doesn't mean anything, she said, her voice softer now, almost pleading. I love you. I stared at her, my pulse steady. You love me? She nodded quickly. Yes, I do. I smiled. Then, without breaking eye contact, I reached out and took her phone from her hand. She gasped, "Give it back." I turned it over, my thumb hovering over the screen. Unlock it. She didn't move, didn't speak, because we both knew that the moment she did, it would be over. And that's when I realized something. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't heartbroken over what she had done. She was just scared of getting caught. The phone in my grip felt heavier than it should have, not because of the weight, but because of what it held. Everything she was hiding from me. She took a step forward, reaching for it, but I pulled it back just out of her reach. Not this time. Unlock it. I repeated, my voice calm but firm. Her eyes darted between mine, searching, calculating. Then she let out a shaky breath. You don't trust me? I almost laughed. Do you really want to ask me that right now? She swallowed, her fingers twitching. Please, she whispered, and for a second, her voice sounded real. But I knew better now. I knew what manipulation looked like when it wore the face of someone you loved. I held the phone up between us. If there's nothing to hide, unlock it. A long silence stretched between us. I could hear the gears turning in her mind, the fight between protecting her secret and salvaging whatever was left of this. She knew that if she refused, she was admitting everything. And yet, if she unlocked it, I would see it all. She had no good options. And that gave me a sick sort of satisfaction. Her lips parted. Here it comes. The final lie. I deleted everything. I smirked. Of course you did. She let out a frustrated sigh, rubbing her temples. It wasn't serious. He didn't mean anything. It was just what? I interrupted. Just sex? Just months of lying to my face. She flinched. That was good. She should flinch. She should feel this. Just a mistake, she finally said, her voice quiet. One I wish I could take back. I tilted my head. Do you? Her bottom lip trembled. She wanted me to believe her. And for a long time, I would have. But not anymore. I turned the phone over in my hand one last time before placing it on the table between us. She frowned. You're not going to look? I shook my head. I don't need to. She let out a breath, relieved. Too relieved, because she thought that meant she had won, that she had gotten away with it. I turned toward the bedroom, grabbed my jacket, and pulled it on. Her smile faltered. Where are you going? I met her gaze, my own unreadable. I don't need proof to know what you are. Her breath hitched. Wait, we can fix this. We? I stepped past her, grabbing my keys. She reached for my arm, desperate now. You said you loved me. I exhaled slowly. I did. Then I pulled my arm away, walked out the door, and left everything behind. And this time, she didn't stop me. The night air hit me like a shock to the system, cold, crisp, and undeniably real. Unlike the past few months of my life, would have been nothing but a carefully constructed lie. I walked to my car without looking back. She wasn't worth a second glance. The key slid into the ignition smoothly, but my hands tightened around the wheel before I could turn it. I could still feel the ghost of her touch, the warmth of her presence in our apartment. The illusion that we had been something real. Had it ever been real? Or had I just been blind? I took a deep breath, exhaling slowly. No, I couldn't think like that. I couldn't let her take more from me than she already had. I pulled out of the driveway, the tires crunching softly against the pavement. As I turned onto the empty road, my phone vibrated on the passenger seat. Her. I let it ring. It stopped, then started again. I clenched my jaw. She didn't get to do this. She didn't get to hurt me and then beg me to come back. The ringing stopped. A second later, a message appeared on the screen. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. Her, please, don't do this. Don't throw us away. A bitter laugh escaped my lips before I could stop it. Us? There was no us anymore. I tossed the phone into the passenger seat and focused on the road ahead. She was behind me now. A chapter one would never reopen. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The road stretched ahead, endless and unfamiliar. I had no destination, just a need to get away. From her, from our home, from the version of myself that had believed in her for far too long. My phone buzzed again. I ignored it. Then again, and again. I finally glanced at the screen. More messages, more desperation. Her, I made a mistake. Her, please, just talk to me. Her, I love you. My fingers clenched around the wheel. She loved me? Was that before or after she whispered to another man in the dark? Before or after she let him touch her? I wasn't sure whether I wanted to scream or laugh. Instead, I pulled over. The engine hummed beneath me, waiting. The world outside was eerily silent, as if holding its breath. I picked up the phone and opened the messages. My thumbs hovered over the screen. I could reply. I could ask her why. Demand an answer that would never satisfy me. But what would that change? She had already made her choice. And now I was making mine. I tapped the screen once. Blocked. The silence that followed was almost deafening. I stared at the screen for a long time, expecting something, a wave of relief, satisfaction, victory. But all I felt was emptiness, like she had taken a part of me with her, leaving behind nothing but a hollow shell. I leaned back in my seat, eyes closed. This was supposed to feel good. Instead, it just felt like a funeral. Because that's what this was, wasn't it? The death of us. And I was the one bearing what was left. I sat there for a long time, staring at the dim glow of the phone screen. The name that had once meant everything was gone now. Erased. Just like that. She no longer had access to me. No more texts. No more calls. No more control. Then why did it still feel like she was inside me? Woven into my skin. Tangled in my thoughts. Lingering in the empty space beside me. I exhaled slowly, forcing my hands to steady on the wheel. Enough. The car's engine rumbled as I pulled back onto the road. The city lights faded in my rear-view mirror, swallowed by the darkness. It almost felt like I was outrunning a ghost. Her ghost. The memories of her. The sound of her voice. The way she used to say my name like I was the only thing that mattered. All of it was dead now, but I was still carrying the corpse. I turned onto the highway, pressing my foot harder on the gas. Distance. I just needed more distance. With every mile, the weight in my chest lessened, just a little. The pain was still there, still fresh, but something else had started creeping in, something unfamiliar. Clarity. For the first time, I saw her for what she truly was. Not my love, not my future, just a lesson, one I had learned the hard way. I wouldn't make the same mistake again. I wouldn't let anyone make a fool of me like this again. And most of all, I would never let her haunt me again. The road stretched endlessly before me, an open wound beneath the pale glow of the streetlights. I had no idea where I was going, and for the first time in my life, I didn't care. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't searching for closure or an apology that would never come. I was just existing. The city was long behind me now, replaced by empty highways and gas stations that blurred together. I stopped at one, my hands stiff from gripping the wheel for too long. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed above me as I grabbed a black coffee and a pack of gum, small things to keep me anchored. The cashier barely glanced at me as he rang me up, and I realized how different this moment felt. Anonymous. For the past few years, I had always belonged to someone. My name had been tied to hers, my world woven into hers. And now, no one in this gas station knew me. No one knew my story. I was just another nameless person passing through. I sipped the bitter coffee, staring out the road. She was probably still awake. Maybe she was crying. Maybe she was furious. Maybe she was with him. I clenched my jaw. No, not my problem anymore. I pulled out my phone, not to check messages, there were none, but just to see the time. 3:12 a.m. A new day, a new beginning. And for the first time, the thought of an empty future didn't scare me, because it meant it was mine to rebuild. The coffee burned my tongue, but I welcomed the pain. It was real, unlike the last few months of my life. I stepped outside, the air crisp and sharp against my skin. The gas station's neon sign buzzed faintly behind me, casting a flickering glow on the pavement. For a brief moment, I stood there, staring at the highway stretching out in front of me. Where was I supposed to go? Every plan I had made, every dream I had built, it had all included her. Now there was just nothing. An open road, an empty horizon, a future I hadn't planned for. I ran a hand through my hair, exhaling slowly. This wasn't supposed to feel like this. I had walked away. I had left her behind. So, why did it still feel like she was everywhere? I glanced down at my phone, half expecting to see a notification, a message, something. But there was nothing, because I had erased her, blocked her, shut her out of my world. And yet, she still existed inside me. I hated it. I hated that I could still hear her voice in my head. Hated that I still remembered the way she smiled at me when she thought I was the only one. Hated that a part of me still wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was all some horrible mistake. But it wasn't. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. I climbed back into the car, tossing the half-empty coffee onto the passenger seat. Then I gripped the wheel, took one last look in the rearview mirror, and pressed my foot down on the gas. No more stopping. No more looking back. Just forward. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, dark and empty, except for the rhythmic glow of passing streetlights. The sound of the tires against the asphalt was the only thing grounding me, the only thing reminding me that I was still here, still breathing, still alive. But part of me wondered, for what? I had spent years believing in something that had never been real. I had loved a woman who had been whispering to another man while I slept beside her. I had built a life that wasn't even mine. It was ours. And now I had no direction, no plan, just a full tank of gas and an empty future. I drove for miles, passing nameless exits, faceless towns. None of them mattered. Nothing mattered. At some point, the exhaustion hit me like a weight pressing down on my chest. My arms felt heavy. My eyes burned. I pulled into a motel parking lot. The neon vacancy sign flickering above me like a heartbeat. The place was run down, forgotten, just like me. Inside, the receptionist barely looked at me as I handed over some cash. "Room 107, he muttered, sliding the key across the counter. I took it without a word. The room was small, stained carpet, peeling wallpaper, the faint smell of cigarettes clinging to the air. But it didn't matter. Nothing mattered anymore. I collapsed onto the bed, staring at the ceiling. The silence was deafening. Too loud. I reached for my phone. Stupid. A habit I hadn't broken yet. Of course, there was nothing. No missed calls. No messages, because I had erased her. But she was still inside me. I squeezed my eyes shut, exhaling slowly. Tomorrow, I would keep driving. Tomorrow, I would wake up and try again. Tomorrow, I would figure out who I was without her. But tonight, I just wanted to disappear. Sleep never came. I lay there in the dark, listening to the hum of the motel's old air conditioning unit, the occasional car passing on the highway outside. I should have been exhausted. My body ached from the long drive. My mind felt shattered. But I couldn't shut it off. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her, the way she looked at me that night, when she realized I knew, the way she whispered into the phone when she thought I was asleep, the way she had reached for me, as if she still had the right. I sat up, rubbing my face. I needed to stop this. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, staring at the cheap carpet. My phone lay on the nightstand, dark and lifeless. I had blocked her, erased her, cut her out of my life. But I hadn't cut her out of my head. I grabbed the phone and turned it on. I knew I shouldn't. I knew it was a mistake. But I needed to know, had she tried to reach me? Had she given up? Had she moved on already? The screen flickered to life. No new messages. No missed calls. Nothing. The absence of her hit harder than her betrayal. I let out a bitter laugh, tossing the phone onto the bed. Of course, she had found someone else to whisper to in the dark. She wasn't thinking about me. She wasn't lying awake in a cheap motel, wondering if she had made a mistake. She had let me go the moment she got caught. I was the only one still sinking. I clenched my fists. No, not anymore. I had already wasted enough time drowning in memories of her. I grabbed my keys and stood up. I wasn't going to wait for sleep. That wouldn't come. I was going to drive until I found something worth living for. Something that wasn't her. The highway was empty, just me and the endless stretch of asphalt disappearing into the night. The motel was behind me now. Just another stop on the way to nowhere. I had no destination. And for the first time, that didn't scare me. She was gone. Not just from my phone, not just from my life, but from me. I had spent so much time drowning in the loss of her, in the betrayal, in the questions that had no answers. But I wasn't lost anymore. She was a part of my past, a version of myself that no longer existed. And the man I used to be? He died the moment she whispered to another man while I lay asleep in our bed. But the man I was becoming? He was still here, still breathing, still moving forward. And for the first time since it all fell apart, I realized I was free. See you soon, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so I have the motivation to teach and find stories for you.